Hello and welcome to another Just Films and That New Release special. This time around, I'm going to be talking about Empire of Light. Hopefully, we're going to try and get a few more of these new release specials out this year where we can, as well as trying to cover films that aren't just blockbusters. So I'm going to try and keep this as spoiler-free as possible, but if you don't want to know anything about the film, then perhaps give it a listen once you've seen it. So, Empire of Light, not Empire of the Light, as I keep calling it in my head. Let's get into it. If you don't know, it's the new film by director Sam Mendes, starring Olivia Colman, and a supporting cast featuring Michael Ward, Colin Firth, Toby Jones, Tom Brooke, Monica Dolan, Tanya Moody. Great cast, loads of great cast. The plot centres around cinema and its staff in the early 80s, set against the backdrop of great political change and upheaval. And that's all I'm going to say about the plot, really, other than it touches on a couple of issues that are both relevant then and relevant now. So the two main ones really being the issue of mental health stigma and racism. Anyway, I was really looking forward going into this one. I'm a big Sam Mendes fan. I've seen every film he's directed, I think, and I don't think I've ever disliked any of his films. I've liked some more than others, massive fan of Skyfall, not too bothered on Spectre, love Away We Go, not that bothered on Revolutionary Road, for example. But overall, I think he's a brilliant director, and I think he brings a real touch of quality and class to his films. Going into it, I had seen a few rumblings online about the reception of this film being sort of mixed to negative. But like with anything, I wanted to watch it and make up my own mind. And I have to say, I really, really like this. Now, if you listen to the podcast, then you'll know that I love films like this, sort of little snapshots of a moment in time or a moment in history. I love them. I always think of them as a slice of life film. How pretentious does that sound just come out of my mouth? Yeah, but anyway, that's what I always think of them as. And that's sort of what this is, really. It reminded me a little bit of something like Away We Go, which is also directed by Sam Mendes. So firstly, what did I like about it? I want to touch on the look and the feel of the film. So it's shot by Roger Deakins, who, if you don't know, is probably or arguably the best cinematographer and DP working today. He's certainly incredibly in demand, and the film looks outstanding. It's set in this beaten down old cinema in Margate on the south coast in the 80s, and somehow he manages to bring a touch of realistic beauty to the whole film. The Art Deco design of the cinema makes for a really great canvas for that. And there are some scenes where the cinema looks really grand and some scenes where it looks a little bit knackered. And it's hard to believe, really, that that's actually the same place. There's some great shots in this as well of stillness and of emptiness that really lend themselves to that feeling of loneliness and isolation that Hilary, Olivia Colman's character, feels. I mean, you could definitely write an essay on how there's this knackered old cinema where the two ground floors look all right and then the top floors have fallen into disrepair. There's definitely a metaphor to be found there. So as well as the camera work, the film looks brilliant as well in terms of its set design, costumes, hair, makeup. It's set in the 80s, as I've already said, and they've clearly gone to great pains to make it as era accurate as it can be. And I think there's a tendency in films like this, where they're set in the 80s, to really amp everything up and be a bit like, oh my God, this is set in the 80s. Remember the 80s? Oh my God, the 80s! But this doesn't do that. What it does do, as I've already sort of touched on, is take great care to make sure all of the costumes and the props are accurate. So the cinema suites and the drinks and stuff are all accurate as they would have been. So you see like old sweets like Tutti Fruttis and stuff like that. It's a really nice touch. I mean, there's a bit in this where someone pays 20p for a box of Maltesers. Spoiler warning. And my head almost fell off, but I think that subtlety feeds into what I think is the message of the film. But no, not so much the message of the film as the issues the film is dealing with. And I think the point it's trying to make is, although this is what I took from it, is that it's pointedly dealing with the issues of both mental health, stigma, and racism. And when I say the look and the film feed into that message, what I mean by that is the film, for me, and people can make up their own mind. But the film for me is saying that these issues are very much relevant and present today as they were then. So whilst it's set in the early 80s, it's not about the 80s as so many films are. So by subtly presenting us with that period accuracy, I think it directs the attention more towards the issues, rather than by putting in a banging 80s soundtrack or whatever and celebrating all that the 80s gave to pop culture. And this then continues with the way the film presents us with those issues, which I think is done in a really, really well balanced way. I mean, it does not over egg the pudding with them like some films tend to do, and it doesn't focus on the more cinematic or dramatic sides of those issues, so we say. So, as I say, the main two issues are mental health stigma and racism. We'll touch on them now. Without spoiling it, I'm trying my best not to spoil it, but there's one particular moment relating to the issue of racism where it absolutely sent a chill down my spine, and I found myself almost shouting at the screen. And then moments later, after that chill, I was almost moved to tears. But the film achieved that without any kind of lingering, almost pornographization of things like racial violence, which I think other films are certainly guilty of doing in order to try and bash you over the head and tell you that issue is important. Whereas this film, I think, is far more subtle. Similarly with the mental health aspect as well, it doesn't overly focus on the dramatic side of things, but rather, well, for example, this is a bit of a minor spoiler, but there's a moment where Olivia Colman's character is having a mental breakdown, and you can see from the film and the way it shows you and everything that she's clearly been stuck inside her flat for days or weeks without leaving and suffering the effects of this mental breakdown. And in that scene, it's clear from the way it's shot that she's been writing on the walls and the wallpaper, but it's not lingering on that fact. It's not lingering on the sort of erratic nature of it. It's focusing on her as a character. There's a big long shot of Olivia Colman's character Hilary doing a monologue about her history and stuff like that. And I think for me, this is where she really shines. She has a monologue, as I say, and she's great all the way through it, but she has a lot of stillness, a lot of quietness, and there's a moment where she does have this massive monologue, and she knocks it out the park. She is truly, for me, she's spellbinding in that scene. And then that moves me, I suppose, onto my final point about the likes, which is the cast. I mean, they're great in this. I mean, Olivia Colman is the standout because she has given them most to do in terms of a Moe, and she is the main character. However, everyone's pretty good in this. As I say, you've got Toby Jones, Tom Brook, Colin Firth, and in it there are definitely the people who work in the cinema are definitely a group of characters you watch, and they're so likable. You think I definitely want to be mates with them. I want to give a shout out to Michael Ward, who plays Stephen in this. He's great in this. I think what he's particularly good at, because the film does do a lot with stillness and action and stuff like that, and I know a lot of this comes down to the direction, but what he's particularly good at is knowing when to emote and move and when not to. And there's a moment in it where he has an altercation with a character, and he is so still in that scene, but you can't take your eyes off him because it's quite clear that what he's doing is almost thinking, should I hit this guy or not? Should I escalate this problem with this guy or not? And you could tell that from his performance. It reminded me a little bit of some more intense Christian Bale performances in that sense. And you know what? He doesn't need to hear it from me. The guy's already won a BAFTA Rising Star Award, but he's got a very, very bright future ahead of him. So, okay, in terms of dislikes then, I did have to rack my brains a little bit on this, I must say. Push comes to shove, if you're pushing me for an answer, which you're not, you're choosing to listen to this, I'm literally giving you my thoughts, but trying to be balanced, I'd say it's probably a little bloated and slowly paced at points, so it is a little bit dull. But that is mainly in the first half of the film, and by no means would I say it's mundane or boring or anything like that. There's just a few little drops in the pace which I think could have been avoided. Other than that, I think they probably could have made better use of Colin Firth because he's barely in it. He doesn't have that much to do. So yeah, it definitely could have been in it more. Other than that, I'd say there was some of the dialogue, particularly when it's trying to really hammer home those issues, where it's a little bit on the nose. But It's nothing for me to kick and scream about, I wouldn't say. As I say, overall, I really, really enjoyed this film. I'm not really sure why it's getting the reaction it's getting. I mean, at the time of recording, this has 45% on Rotten Tomatoes from the critics, and I know that these things are subjective. Everyone feels what they feel, but for me, 45% is criminal. And whilst things like this might not be for everyone, I would say it's definitely worth your time to go out there and make up your own mind. And do you know what? Whilst you're doing it, you'll be supporting British film in the process if you care about that. So anyway, that's what I think. Until next time, thank you very much for listening. We'll be back as we always are every Tuesday with a normal episode in your podcast feed. Thank you very much for listening. Cheerio!